Welcome to Podsdale, where we explore the stories that make Scottsdale truly special. I'm your host, Holly Walter from the city's Office of Communication. Join me as we learn what makes Scottsdale tick. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. A recent Podsdale episode focused entirely on our city's wonderful volunteers, and today we have more. Specifically, we are talking about our boards and commissions. We have several, and the people who serve in these positions are entirely volunteers. Residents wishing to volunteer their time and institute a positive change are regularly invited to apply to serve. And today to talk about it is our Deputy City Clerk, Rommel Cordova, but he's also our Board and Commission liaison. I also have Neal Shearer with me. He chairs our Human Services Advisory Commission. Welcome to you both.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure to join you.
Rommel, I'm going to start with you. The first question I like to ask new guests is to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Great, thank you. My name is Rommel Cordova. I'm one of the deputy city clerks here in our city clerk's office. This will be my 20th year in municipal government, which is shocking that that's come up so quickly. I started at the city of Chandler my senior year in high school and have just stayed in municipal government since then. And I've been fortunate to be here as a member of the city of Scottsdale for the past 6.5 years.
And have you spent that entire time in the city clerk's office?
Here in Scottsdale, yes. In Chandler, I worked a few different departments in the clerk's office, mayor and council, and the last position I held there was working as a management assistant to the city manager.
Let's talk about the variety of opportunities we offer to citizens to serve on our boards and commissions.
Yes, so Scottsdale, we have over 25 public bodies, so 25 board and commissions, and we have about 150 members. So, and as you mentioned, these are volunteer positions. So these are residents wanting to get involved. They're not getting paid for this. They're donating their time. And for some boards or commissions, they're donating and spending a lot of time with meetings and the materials that they review and decide on. We have a multitude of board and commissions, people with all different types of backgrounds. There's probably some type of public body where they can apply their interest or their experience. Kind of sometimes separate them. There's land use and building review public bodies. So Board of Adjustment, Building Advisory Board of Appeals, Development Review Board, Planning Commission. Those are real popular groups when we have openings. Then we also have some that are maybe a little bit more employee-focused groups. We have the Personnel Board, Public Safety Personnel Retirement Boards, some that are more human and social services, like the group that Neal serves on, Human Services Advisory Commission, Human Relations Commission. And then we have some that deal with infrastructure, public bodies, parks, neighborhoods, the Preserve, the McDowell Marine Preserve Commission. We always get a good amount of applicants when we have openings on those boards. So Parks and Recreation, Library Board, Environmental Advisory Commission. That's a popular one as well. And I know that group's been very busy the last couple of years on the sustainability plan and those types of initiatives.
A lot. Like you said, it pretty much covers almost everything, and there's something for everyone or any type of interest that you may have. Rommel, can you go over some of the requirements that we have for service on a board or commission?
Yes. So Scottsdale, we have particular requirements. Every board or commission position, a member has to be a Scottsdale resident. So you have to be a Scottsdale resident to apply. That differs from some other communities where if you work there, you could possibly apply, but that's a requirement for all of our public bodies here. So you have to be a Scottsdale resident at the time you apply and throughout the duration of your term. We do verify that when applications are submitted to the clerk's office. There are conditions of appointments when someone is successful and ends up joining a board or commission. There's an attendance policy in our city code. So if a member misses 3 consecutive meetings or 4 meetings within a 6-month period, they could possibly be removed from office. And likewise, if someone were to commit a felony or certain crime, that could also constitute their removal from office. Citizen requirements, kind of a general requirement, obviously, for all of our boards or commissions, but some may be very specific. So, for example, we have the Tourism Development Commission, and that public body, the requirements for members have to be Scottsdale hoteliers. So not only are you required to live in Scottsdale, but you have to be in that field, right? So you have to actually work for a Scottsdale hotelier. And then the balance of that commission are industry-related positions. So you can be a Scottsdale resident, but maybe you are, you work in the restaurant industry or something like that. Judicial advisory the JAB, Judicial Advisory Appointments Board. The makeup of that, there's some citizen members, but then there's also some individuals that one member has to be a member and recommended by the Scottsdale Bar. Another one has to be by the State Bar. So those are a little bit more in particular. The applications that we have online for some groups, if there are particular requirements or background and qualifications for a particular board, they'll be included as supplemental questions. So for example, Development Review Board, it'll ask members to specify, if they have design background, or if they're industry. Environmental Advisory Commission, it'll note there, if they're representing and have a scientific background, or if there are any kind of other background that may apply, or if it's just a citizen that maybe has a lot of interest but maybe didn't go to school for something like that. So we have a handful of groups that background is maybe needed,
right.
Or obviously it's very helpful when
Sure.
that is something that they do in their career and their professional lives.
That makes sense. And thank you for explaining that, because I have seen openings in the past where there were specific requirements attached. So it makes sense, and it demonstrates that need. Serving on an advisory committee, you're advising, and oftentimes, depending on the board or commission, we need someone with that subject matter expertise to provide that input.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about the process. The first step to become a board or commission member is to apply, of course, and we have that application online. What happens after someone submits their application?
Yes, we have the application online, so if anybody's interested, you can go to ScottsdaleAZ.gov and search boards and commissions, and that'll take you to our main page, and there's a link there for our online application. Once an application is submitted, and let me backtrack, a resident can only apply for one board or commission at a time. So, and that's an important thing to note. We sometimes get people that are, interested in a handful of groups, which is great. But we ask that they narrow it down to one, and then we'll review and process that application. And it can also attach any kind of background information. So copies of resumes, some people have attached copies of certificates or things like that that apply to the particular group that they're applying for. That application gets routed to city clerk staff, and we review what gets submitted. We verify residency requirement. So we will use our LIS system that we have here and verify the residency requirements, and then we'll follow up with the applicant if there is questions or if we need some kind of supplemental documentation to verify that they're a Scottsdale resident. Sometimes that happens when folks are renting in an apartment or something like that, and we can't verify that. So
okay.
Likewise, we also have some individuals that may have a Scottsdale mailing address, but they really are Phoenix residents, or sometimes they live in PV. Mm-hmm. We verify all of that information. Then applications remain on file for a period of 1 year, so from the date that they are received. Typically have appointments happened quarterly. Sometimes it might happen a little bit more than that, but that's typically what we have in a year. So we break them down in cycles, and then any applications that we have on file for those current openings, we forward those on to the city council. But we do accept applications year-round. So, for example, we may not have an opening right now on the Airport Advisory Commission, but we may have someone that's really interested, so they apply today. Their application would be processed and kept on file for a full year, so a year from now, and say, somebody resigned in 3 months and it was an expected vacancy, then that application would get included in any others that we have on file and get forwarded on. So we do target and we'll advertise, current and future openings, but we definitely will process anything that's received.
Okay, that's a good tip, because I know you can go online and look at a person's term, so you kind of get a sense of when openings will occur, but you never know. Sometimes things happen and they open sooner than you expect. So it's good to know that you can apply, submit your application anytime. And to clarify, so those appointments are made by our city council, correct?
Yes, it is a two-step process. So after we receive your application, we have that on file, we verify everything, we compile all that documentation and provide that to city council. Two-step process. At one of their regular meetings, they will review the applicant pool and the listing that we have, and they'll make their selections based on that applicant pool and nominate individuals to proceed in the process. Those individuals that get nominated, city clerk staff, we will reach out to them and invite them to participate. It's a public meeting where their interviews and appointments take place. So that's the second part in the process. So council will hold a special meeting. At City Hall, it's open to the public. It's streamed online. People can view that. And those individuals that are nominated, they get 2 minutes to address the council. Since the pandemic, we've had the capability to have folks participate virtually. So sometimes some people can't make it, and that's been, and the council's enjoyed that as well. And if someone's not able to attend in person, we try to make accommodations and include everyone with that. After the individuals address the council's able to follow up with any follow-up questions, and then the council makes their official votes and selections that same evening.
Now, you talked about some of the requirements for service. So someone's selected. Then what happens next? What are some of those next steps for that individual?
So after an individual is appointed and selected, we follow up with them and we'll set up an appointment to go over ethics training and their initial onboarding. And that's done with us in the clerk's office. We review with them open meeting law, general overview of open meeting law and city's ethics code. And we review materials that are prepared in conjunction with our city attorney's office. We'll review conflicts of interest forms, different forms that they may need to complete, and declarations that they need to know that in case they need to do that during their term. We also go and review city's website and how they can access meeting agendas and minutes. A lot of these appointees are already familiar because they've attended meetings and things like that, but we like to review as much information as we can. That is a requirement. They have to complete that training and complete a loyalty oath, an oath of office form before they can actually attend their first meeting. So we schedule that and try to get that completed soon after their initial appointment. Sometimes some folks get appointed and then they have meetings scheduled, within a week or two. So we try to get them up to speed as fast as we can. Then the staff liaisons, we have very dedicated staff liaisons throughout the organization, and they'll meet with their new members and bring them up to speed and start developing the rapport between them.
Great. And thank you for the entire rundown on the process. Rommel, can you remind our listeners again where to go to find out more information on boards and commissions?
Yes, absolutely. You can go to ScottsdaleAZ.gov and search boards and commissions. That will take you to the main board and commission webpage. Every public body that we have has their own webpage that you can find at that main landing page. And there's also a link to apply and access the online application at that same webpage.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, let's go ahead and pivot and now talk to somebody who has actually gone through this entire process and serves as a chair of one of our advisory commissions, and that's Neal Shearer. Neal, tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's start with that.
Well, thanks, Holly. I'm a longtime Scottsdale resident, and I've been fortunate to work in community management for 42 years, with 32 of those years in various roles with the city of Scottsdale. So the city has been very instrumental in shaping my professional life, my values, and frankly, my love of public service. I started with the city as an intern in graduate school, and through the years had many exciting jobs, including executive assistant to the late Mayor Herb Drinkwater, who served as mayor for 16 years and was a council member for 8 years before that, and was a legend in Scottsdale. And that's why there's a statue of Mayor Drinkwater in front of City Hall. I also had an opportunity to serve as an assistant to the city manager for intergovernmental relations. I served as the general manager of human resources and also assistant city manager for about 5 years. And perhaps the most rewarding role of all of my jobs was serving as the human services director in the mid-1990s. And it was an exciting time at the city to be involved because that was a time when we created the Paiute Neighborhood Center, built the Via Linda Senior Center, and established the Scottsdale Cares Utility Bill Donation Program that raises about $150,000 a year for grants to area nonprofit service providers. So I really fell in love with human services. And so when I retired a few years ago, I knew I wanted to apply to be on the Human Services Commission.
What an incredible professional history. It must have been amazing to work with former Mayor Drinkwater. I've heard so many stories about him, and to watch those centers open sounds like it was a very rewarding experience.
It was an incredibly fun and robust journey to work with Mayor Drinkwater. I will say there was sort of an unwritten rule that those of us that served in that role could only last about 2 years because he had such a high energy level, we couldn't keep up with him. So there were quite a few of us that served the mayor during his course of time in the mayor's office. And yes, I was fortunate to work at a time when the city was growing and we were involved in a number of really exciting projects. I mean, we completed the Indian Bend Wash, and we were involved in expanding the geographical boundaries of the city to go up and include Pinnacle Peak and beyond all the way to Desert Mountain, and a number of great quality of life amenities were approved and built in our community over the years that I was involved in the city. So I was very fortunate to have an opportunity as a young intern to land in such a wonderful place to be.
And you're definitely well-versed in all things Scottsdale, and it seems like a perfect spot for you to be on our Human Services Advisory Commission. Can you talk about that experience? Describe your experience. What kind of things do you do on that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. One of the interesting situations with regard to the Human Services Commission is we actually wear two hats because there is overlap between human services and social service issues and housing issues. So a few years ago, the City Council passed an ordinance to designate members of the Human Services Commission to also sit as members of the Housing Agency Governing Board. So we get a chance to get involved in both of those issues. And I'll speak first to the Human Services Commission. We provide advisory recommendations to the City Council on an array of human services priorities, programs, services, and funding. And one of the examples with regard to funding is on an annual basis, we review several dozen applications from nonprofit agencies for funds that the city has available to nonprofits to provide a variety of services to youth and families and seniors and people with disabilities, people in need of crisis services, counseling and case management, ranging from emergency and transitional housing to supporting victims of domestic violence and other forms of abuse. So there's a process that we go through that starts in the fall where the staff will put out requests for proposals. And then in the early part of the new year, once those proposals are reviewed at the staff level, the Human Services Commission will go through a very detailed review of reading all the proposals individually, and then we'll come together as a commission in open public session, discuss the proposals, and ultimately have a vote regarding the way we can allocate the funds, which are unfortunately always limited because we get more requests for funds than we have funds available. But for example, in this last funding cycle, which we just completed, we had about $600,000 over the course of 5 different funding sources to allocate to a variety of these very worthy nonprofit agencies that serve Scottsdale and the general area.
So several challenging decisions to be made and recommendations to provide, but it sounds like it's very rewarding as well.
It's extremely rewarding, and it's also quite enjoyable to hear from all of the nonprofits that do so many great things in our community. And I think when people think about human services, we think about our senior centers and Vista del Camino and the Paiute Neighborhood Center and Youth and Family Services. Those are all city programs, but the city relies a great deal on partnerships with our nonprofit communities, to our nonprofit organizations, to really do a lot of the heavy direct service provision in our community. And we're so grateful that our citizens donate funds through their utility bill to Scottsdale Cares, that we're recipients of community development block grant funds on an annual basis, that we can also distribute to nonprofit agencies. And we also receive funds from the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community. And so those funds all go into this pot that we allocate. Now, some of those dollars have different eligibility requirements for those funds. But we work through that process following sort of a very strict process that staff provides that helps us sort of stay on track and keep things moving forward, in the right way. And so it is rewarding. It's a long process, but when we get to the end of it, we feel really good that we've been able to help so many different great agencies in our community.
And you mentioned earlier that these commissioners wear two hats, really. So can you talk about the other side of the work that you do?
Be happy to. The city of Scottsdale has a housing agency that receives funding from the Department of Housing and Urban Development to support subsidies for rents for individuals who meet certain income standards, typically are lower income residents who are in difficult situations. As we know, rents have increased throughout the valley. And so we are fortunate to have funding from the federal government that allows us to have about 750 vouchers, housing choice vouchers, that members of our community can apply for online, go through a process, get their income verified, and receive a voucher. And with that voucher, they can go to any landlord that's renting units in Scottsdale. And if they're accepted through the landlord's process, the city will offset the cost of their rent through the federal funds and pay those funds directly to the landlord. So it's a really good arrangement for landlords in our community because it's a very streamlined process where you receive that automatic check from the city. It's not bureaucratic at all, and it's a wonderful process for residents who are trying to keep their head above water with rising rents, and they've got these vouchers, and incidentally, the vouchers are portable. So voucher holders from any of our neighboring communities can find units in Scottsdale and vice versa. So Scottsdale residents can take a voucher to other communities if they have a change in employment or have to move for some reason.
That's great. And Rommel, did you want to add something to that?
If I could just add something to that. So that is a unique aspect of the Human Services Advisory Commission. So those 7 individuals that serve on Human Services Commission, as part of their appointment, they automatically, as Neal mentioned, they'll get appointed to and they'll serve as Human Services Advisory Commission, acting as the Housing Agency Governing Board. That particular board has an additional member, so it's the 7 Human Services Advisory Commission members, plus an 8th member who is a Scottsdale resident as well, but they have to be a recipient of a housing choice voucher.
Oh, okay.
And that individual serves in that capacity as a representative, and it meets that particular requirement for the makeup of that board. It gets verified through our Human Services or Community Assistance Office. They verify that that person is indeed, in fact, receiving that voucher and can fill that spot. Most of our boards and commission terms are for 3 years, but for that particular position, that housing choice voucher recipient, it's a 1-year term. We do have an individual that's serving that at the moment, but they would be just eligible to serve that 1 year, and then they can seek reappointment thereafter. That's a particular unique instance of that particular board.
Something I didn't know, so I just learned something new today. And Neal, we had the opportunity to chat before we started recording the podcast, and I think I said to you and determined just through our conversation that public service is really in your blood, I think. So let's talk about why you serve on this specific commission. I know we talked about that a little bit, and I think you've covered it, but to just reiterate that.
Thank you, Holly. I'm happy to do that because I was so fortunate to spend so many years of my life seeing the great work of the Scottsdale City employees and leadership of the City Council and all the great work of volunteers on the boards and commissions. And the human services area has always inspired me because I see the dedication and passion of the staff and the difference that they make in people's lives. And as I touched on earlier, it's also really eye-opening to see the extraordinary work performed by the nonprofit organizations that we partner with to provide additional services to our community. So it was a natural for me to seek membership on the Human Services Commission.
It makes sense. And from your perspective and thinking about all of our boards and commissions, how does the city benefit from this service?
Well, as we all know, the City Council has a lot on their plate. They're very busy, and so the Human Services Commission and other boards and commissions provide that upfront prep work on a variety of issues. And they do vetting sometimes in the form of public hearings where they will take a deep dive into various issues with input from the public. They will assist in evaluating services. And as I mentioned earlier, do a lot of legwork, as we do on Human Services, to evaluate a variety of funding requests that come through our request for proposals. And so there's a lot of work that the commissions do to be able to put the city council in a more informed position, because we act not only as members of a board or commission, but we're also citizens, and we hear from citizens. And so our advice then goes forward for their consideration. And I think it's rewarding to see how grateful the city council is to all of the boards and commissions. They really appreciate getting input on these various topics that we all work on.
And what would you tell others to encourage them to apply for a board or commission?
Well, one of the things that I would say is it's a great way to learn and give back to the community on issues and services that are important to you. Rommel mentioned that we've got a couple dozen or more public bodies that consist of volunteers in addition to our elected leadership on the city council. And so there's really something for everybody. I can't think of a city government issue that there's not a body that is, designated to assist the city council with some of the important issues that involve those areas. The other thing that I will mention is, while the process can be a bit intimidating for people, because as Rommel mentioned, you have to submit an application and you have to provide a fair amount of information, and then you go through a nominating process, and ultimately, if you're nominated, you do go to a city council meeting and have some time to talk about your interests and qualifications. And for some people, they may say, geez, I'd like to serve, but I'm really not good at public speaking. And I would say that doesn't matter. I mean, the council's not interested in people who are polished speakers. They want people who have a genuine desire to serve for all the right reasons. And so I would strongly encourage those people to go for it. And the last thing I would say on that is I would not want people to be discouraged if they are not selected on their first go-through, because some of the boards and commissions have a lot of applicants and only a limited number of vacancies. And so it may take you a couple of tries or more before you can land on, a board or commission. And I would just encourage people to keep sticking with it and stay with the process.
Those are great pieces of advice for those who are interested in pursuing the process. Rommel, do you have any other final thoughts to share?
And Neal I mentioned a really great point. I've gotten that feedback before where someone maybe applies and goes through the process and feels discouraged. But I say, please do not feel discouraged. As I mentioned, your application remains on file for a period of 1 year. We have unexpected vacancies that arise, and application will get reviewed again. And perhaps that second time or the third time you'd be successful. I know quite a bit of folks where that has happened. And, then they made it and they got appointed, and then they were reappointed again, and they ended up serving a long time on a particular board or commission. So we have routine vacancies. Our webpage gets updated a lot. We have, as you mentioned earlier, we have a listing of known and future openings, but please, submit your application, have that on file. Or if you went through that process and you weren't successful, but you noticed that there's an opening on a different board or commission, you can withdraw that application and apply to serve on the other one and go through that process. But yeah, definitely do not get discouraged. And as Neal mentioned, it could be a little intimidating speaking before the council at a public meeting, but everybody gets the same amount of time to answer the standard set of questions to the council and essentially explain why they desire to serve and provide back to the community.
Well, Rommel, Neal, thank you so much for joining us on the show today and talking about our boards and commissions and how you can become involved. And for those who are interested, once again, it's ScottsdaleAZ.gov, and you just search boards and commissions. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
That's all for this episode of Podsdale. If you enjoyed listening, be sure to subscribe. You can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Feel free to share your thoughts and experiences with us by emailing communications@ScottsdaleAZ.gov. We would love to hear from you. Until next time, this is Holly Walter signing off and inviting you to be part of the Scottsdale story.